think another big misconception with us is that we're these big, like, drug-induced freakoids, which, on one side of things, like, there is a truth to that. Like,
there's been an influence.
Yeah, we have been informed by that sort of stuff, psychedelic drugs or whatever, but at the same time, like, none of our records have ever been recorded on psychedelic drugs. Like, we've never performed on psychedelic drugs. I don't know.
These mushrooms, often called magic mushrooms due to their psychoactive effects, have been used by humans for thousands of years, often for ceremonial purposes.
I guess it's what Noah was saying, we aren't trying to force, like, anything.
The effects of psilocybin on our brain are complex. The effect most people may be familiar with is its distinctive auditory and visual hallucinations it causes when ingested. As clinical research continues, it's still poorly understood how or why psilocybin works in the brain to counteract depression.
So you're curious about psychedelics and you want to make sure you have a good trip. Well, in this video, I'm going to guide you to the best of my ability on having a good trip. There's a few things you need to avoid and a few things you need to prepare for in order to have the best outcome on any kind of psychedelic trip. But in this video, I'm focusing on magical mushrooms because I think they're the most beneficial, the most natural, and pretty easy to access as well, especially these days. I don't claim to be an expert or anything when it comes to psychedelics or mushrooms, but I have had a handful of positive experiences that I think I've learned a lot from, and hopefully I can help guide other people towards similar experiences. The first two things to keep in mind are the most important, the set and the setting. By set, I mean your mindset. What is your intention going into the trip? And a lot of people, they want to have fun, they want to just let loose, get fucked up. That is not what you want to do with shrooms. If your intention is just to have fun and escape reality, you're going to have more than likely a really bad trip. The other thing, your stomach. Don't have any food in your stomach. Be in a fasted state. Certainly don't be drinking any alcohol anytime near your trip. Alcohol is a suppressant. It sort of dulls your emotions and your thinking. Shrooms do the opposite. They don't dull your senses, they heighten them. Both your audio-visual acuity and also your thinking and your language centers of the brain, those things are all elevated to a completely different level. The other thing is your emotional state and kind of just how open-minded you're willing to be. That's the other part of mindset. If you're someone who's very closed off and maybe frustrated and angry and you're just looking, again, to have a release, shrooms are not really the best option for that. What they will do instead is bring out your inner emotions and bring out anything that you're hiding from about yourself and about what you're thinking, and that'll come to the surface, and you're going to have to deal with it in one way or another, which is where acceptance comes in and open-mindedness. You need to be accepting of whatever experience you have. Don't fight it. Don't argue with it. Don't be afraid. And be open-minded to the possibilities that await you. The other essential thing to consider is the setting. And by that, I mean where you are and what time of the day it is, as well as who you're around. Being indoors versus outdoors while tripping will generally be a very different experience because indoors you're sort of more cooped up, you're more with your thoughts, maybe you're more introspective, you're not getting as much or any natural light, and there is a tendency for some people to feel claustrophobic, maybe a little bit anxious or paranoid if they are indoors for too long, especially while tripping. So that one I would approach with caution, but it can certainly be done in a calm and peaceful setting. That's something to keep in mind, is the level of noise and commotion and stimulation going on in your environment. Where I am right now is out in the desert by this mountain, and it's pretty quiet. There are some people over there, and there are some cars over there, some people hiking here, but generally speaking, I feel private, free, and open right here. I'm not worried about anything. Out in nature is really the best place to be, ideally surrounded by trees and maybe water, just some sort of beautiful natural formations. That will tie in directly with your experience on the trip and what you get out of it. Because a big part of it, I think, is appreciating nature and the world around us for what it truly is. In doing so, the time of the day is also very important. I generally would recommend starting your trip, taking your mushroom, taking whatever it is, around early to mid-afternoon, so that by the time you're on the come down, it's evening, and that's a good time to eat dinner and just sort of collect your thoughts and reflect on how your day was. And if you're outside and walking about a little bit, it gives you the chance to be with nature, to be with the cycle of life, the cycle of the sun and the sky, and just consider these things that are greater than yourself and be a part of it in a way that you've never been before. Now, if you're going alone on this trip, then all you really have to consider are the people, on the trail or around you in the environment. But if you're going on this trip with someone else and you're both taking shrooms, or a group of people, it's not that that's a bad idea. It could be an amazing experience, but you have to heavily consider what type of people they are and how they make you feel, how well you know them, and how much you trust them. I would not recommend tripping with someone who's a stranger or even someone you don't know very well, because a lot of things will come out, a lot of traumas, a lot of emotional hangups, deep, dark thoughts that most of the time they themselves didn't even know they had. They will come to the surface, and you might have to feel the impacts of that emotionally, psychologically, or even physically. Well, hopefully not, but the point is, who you surround yourself with is very important, because whatever reading you get of people now in a sober mind state, that will be heightened times 10 when you're with people on shrooms. I would strongly recommend against going to any party setting, any stranger's house or something where you don't know the people and you're going to be close with them. Not a good combination. You don't really have to worry about overthinking or planning too much in terms of the realizations that will just naturally come to you on a trip. You should more so be considering the set and setting. And as long as you're out in nature in a place you feel comfortable, you're able to walk around a little bit, you're well hydrated, and you're in a fasted state in the mid-afternoon, I think you're set for a pretty good time, assuming you're not a completely paranoid and, overly worried person. And if you are, then maybe shrooms aren't for you, at least not yet. Again, your mindset is equally as important as the setting. The dosage is definitely important. I would say anything beyond 1 gram is a trip dose, but obviously people, depending on how heavy they are, how tall they are, and your tolerance level, those things are all factors. But generally speaking, above 1 gram is a trip amount. Beneath that is a microdose. Microdose is a perfectly harmless and low commitment, I guess, way to experiment with shrooms. If you're curious, you're not going to have nearly as intense of an experience as a full-on trip, but you will glean some more perspective from your everyday life. And I would still recommend going on a hike or somewhere out in nature, even on a microdose. Now, in terms of a full-on trip itself, aside from all the physiological, scientific, chemical stuff that's happening, which you can read all about and watch plenty of videos about, what really matters is the part that's harder to put into words, the experience, which will be uniquely yours, but I do think there are some universal experiences that come from shrooms, some universal wisdom even. And that's where I would say trusting your intuition is very important. Everything will just be more meaningful to you, and you will feel more connected to life. And I think the reason for that is because you're viewing things with a fresh perspective. You're not viewing things in the conditioned, sober mindset that we've all grown accustomed to. It's sort of like being a kid again and having a sense of wonder and imagination about the world, about yourself, about the possibilities of life, which are endless. And shrooms remind you of that infinite potential. They in fact allow you to experience it outside of the boundaries of time and language and even thought. And I bring all those things up because the higher dosage you take And as you approach a peak on shrooms, I think it's important to not think too much at all. Your mind might wander with all these amazing possibilities, but I've found, at least in my experiences, after a certain point, I didn't even want to articulate what I'm saying into words. I didn't even want to think that much. I just wanted to be, I guess, to meditate, to sort of just be with everything around me. And again, this is why it helps to be around trees, to be around life, because when life is flowing, it's easier to flow with it. And if you're cooped up in an apartment, you're in the city, you're by a lot of cars and construction and traffic, and you're tripping there, it's going to be an overwhelming experience. It's going to be frightening, anxiety inducing. You don't want to be there. That's where you overthink, and that's where you can run into a bad trip.
This freeway is a bit much, if I'm being honest. Not my favorite.
It makes you face whatever hang-ups you have emotionally or otherwise. My phone is something I never look at when I'm tripping. I just have no desire to. It just feels like a fake artifice of reality. It doesn't even feel like I'm really living when I'm on my phone and I'm tripping. Same thing with even using the internet and too much technology in general. I don't generally want to be too closed off from the world. I don't want to be wearing sunglasses. I don't want to be in a car, I just want to be in the most natural state I can be, while being safe and ideally feeling a bit of the warmth from the sun. And I mentioned this, but when tripping, I realized how time is such a prison, or it can be at least, if you're constantly worried about where you have to be next, where you have to go, what your schedule is. Schedules can be useful, but they can also be a bit of a limitation. And I think a lot of people are limited by how much time they have. And they don't really get to spend that time appreciating what life is all about, which I think is living in the moment, is forgetting that time exists at all. That's kind of the best parts of life. And shrooms certainly get you there. You don't need shrooms to get you there, but they help. The amount of ideas and inspiration you can pull from a trip is almost infinite. I mean, even just seeing the sun set behind those red sandstone mountains, there's so much meaning you could pull from that. One time I was tripping in a park, and it was kind of late afternoon, and I was enjoying the heat of the sun, and I realized that sitting out in the sun is kind of like childhood. It's kind of like your youth. It's that pure innocence. It's that warmth. And then as the sun slowly starts to set, it becomes this sort of bittersweet end of that warmth, and onto the night, the darkness, the unknown. And when the sun did set, I realized, well, now it's time to stand and be a man. Now it's time to survive until the next day when the sun will come up again. And in that way, even just observing the cycle of one day in as natural of a state as you can, and as fresh of a perspective as you can teach you a lot about life and about yourself. And, maybe this doesn't mean that much to you, and maybe I can convey certain ideas to a more universal audience, but it is really ultimately something that you have to experience yourself to get the most meaning out of. There's only so much I can convey from my experiences, I find. But it is important to understand how to use this original technology, as I call it, because that's what shrooms are. That's what psychedelics are. They're the original technology. They transport you from one place to the other, except in this case, it's more of a mental, metaphysical, spiritual transportation. Well, that's all for now, and I plan to make more videos about psychedelics and such. Not that this whole channel is going to be dedicated to that, but I do find it interesting, and I do think, I hope you guys enjoyed these tips for having a good trip, and if there are any more questions that you have, feel free to message me on Twitter, Instagram, whatever, or even in the comments, and maybe I'll make another video addressing further questions later on. Thanks for watching. Have a good trip. Say
the things that